Tempest in Teyvat, Rimuru's Elemental Odyssey by KabirSingh808. The revelation of Rex Lapis. The scene shifted dramatically as Mountain Shaper and Cloud Retainer transformed into their human forms, preparing to face the formidable Feldway. Their expressions were unwavering as they assessed him, every movement radiating power and focus. An outlander, Cloud Retainer noted with a tone of subtle disdain, her sharp gaze never leaving Feldway. Mountain Shaper nodded in agreement, eyes narrowing as he gauged Feldway's stance. Without hesitation, he took his own, a shimmering sword materializing in his hands as he prepared to engage. Cloud Retainer held her ground behind him, summoning a catalyst to assist from a distance, her adeptal energy swirling around her in a display of readiness. Without a word, Mountain Shaper launched himself forward, charging directly at Feldway with his blade raised. He swung with impressive speed and precision, aiming to catch Feldway off guard. Yet, Feldway intercepted the strike with ease, his smirk widening. "Is that all you've got?" he taunted, his voice laced with scorn as he met Mountain Shaper's gaze head-on. But before Feldway could make another remark, a sudden burst of anemo energy surged toward him, sent by Cloud Retainer from her position in the back. Feldway sidestepped the gust with fluid agility, his movements almost imperceptibly fast, leaving him unharmed as he straightened up, taking a calculated step back to reassess. In a flash, Feldway's posture shifted, his body practically a blur as he accelerated forward with shocking speed. Even the sharp eyes of the adeptee struggled to keep up as he vanished from sight, reappearing in front of Mountain Shaper almost instantaneously. With a practiced grace, Feldway raised his sword, poised to deliver a deadly, vertical slice. Mountain Shaper's instincts kicked in at the last possible moment, and he managed to bring up his sword just in time to intercept Feldway's strike. The impact sent a tremor through Mountain Shaper's arms, the sheer force of Feldway's attack pushing him back several paces. He gritted his teeth, maintaining his stance as he dug his heels into the ground. Cloud Retainer seized the moment, channeling a series of anemo-infused projectiles from her catalyst and sending them hurtling toward Feldway. Each shot was precise, forcing him to split his attention as he dodged and deflected, momentarily breaking his focus from Mountain Shaper. With Feldway distracted, Mountain Shaper stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he began to draw energy from the earth itself. The ground beneath him trembled as geo-energy enveloped his blade, causing it to glow with a fierce golden light. With renewed determination, he launched himself at Feldway again, bringing his sword down in a powerful upward arc, aiming to overwhelm his opponent with sheer strength. Meanwhile, Cloud Retainer raised her hands, calling upon a swirling storm of wind and energy that wrapped around her form. She directed the force towards Feldway, amplifying Mountain Shaper's strikes with gusts of anemo that sought to destabilize their opponent and break his defenses. The battlefield crackled with raw power as the three clashed, each strike creating shockwaves that reverberated through the surrounding landscape. Despite the adeptee's combined might, Feldway continued to hold his ground, his movements swift and calculated as he deflected both adeptees' attacks with precise, deadly efficiency. His smirk never faltered, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes as he matched their every move with ease. Mountain Shaper's attacks grew fiercer, his blade moving with renewed vigor as he took advantage of every opening, each strike backed by his geo-infused strength. Cloud Retainer provided unyielding support, her wind projectiles targeting Feldway's blind spots, forcing him to continually reposition. In a rare moment, Mountain Shaper and Cloud Retainer exchanged a brief glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. With a synchronized nod, they adjusted their stances, readying themselves for a final, coordinated strike. Cloud Retainer gathered her power, summoning an immense whirlwind that swept towards Feldway, while Mountain Shaper charged, channeling his adeptal energy into a single, powerful swing aimed directly at Feldway's chest. Feldway's smirk shifted into a more intense expression as he braced himself, recognizing the incoming attack as a genuine threat. He raised his sword, deflecting the whirlwind with a forceful slash as he maneuvered to block Mountain Shaper's blow. The clash of powers created a massive shockwave, scattering debris and causing the very air to crackle with energy. As the dust settled, the three combatants remained locked in a tense standoff, each one breathing heavily, their gazes never wavering. Feldway's smirk had returned, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling excitement. "Is that all the famed adeptee have to offer?" he sneered. Feldway's aura pulsed ominously, gathering intense energy around him as he prepared his next move. Cloud Retainer and Mountain Shaper tensed, fully aware that something devastating was coming but unable to predict his next action. Then, in a split second, Feldway vanished from their sight, his form dissolving into an unsettling blur as he seemed to melt into the very air around them. Suddenly, he reappeared directly in front of Mountain Shaper, his speed so blindingly fast it defied all logic. Mountain Shaper's instincts flared, his mind racing as he tried to form a protective geoshield where Feldway was aiming to strike. But he was too late. Feldway's knee connected with his abdomen, shattering the hastily created shield and sending a shockwave of force through Mountain Shaper's body. The impact blasted him back like a ragdoll, hurtling him into a nearby stone pillar. The pillar exploded into shards on impact, rubble crashing down around Mountain Shaper, burying him beneath the debris. Cloud Retainer's heart sank as she saw her comrade fall, but she couldn't risk turning her attention away from Feldway for even a moment. She knew that a single lapse in focus could spell disaster. Clenching her jaw, she maintained her stance, her eyes locked onto Feldway as she analyzed his every move. His power was shocking, she hadn't expected this level of strength. The thought struck her, how is this man ranked only as the 12th Harbinger? His strength surpasses even Dottores, who Xiao and Moon Carver are already struggling against. Feldway's piercing gaze shifted to her, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement as he noted her tense stance. He gave her a mocking smile, clearly reveling in the thrill of the battle. Cloud Retainer steadied herself, her catalyst crackling with concentrated anemo energy, her body practically vibrating with readiness as she prepared to intercept whatever he had planned next. She took a deep, calming breath, allowing herself to focus as she drew up every ounce of her skill and strength. The two opponents stared each other down in silence, Feldway's smile never faltering. He raised an eyebrow, a glint of challenge in his eyes, daring her to attack first. Cloud Retainer gripped her catalyst tightly, her mind racing. I must hold him off, she reminded herself, casting a fleeting glance towards the rubble where Mountain Shaper lay. We cannot afford to lose here. But as she held her stance, she could sense that Feldway was not even close to reaching the limits of his power. This man, with his cold confidence and sheer overwhelming might, was unlike any opponent she had ever faced. Feldway narrowed his eyes, closing the distance between himself and Cloud Retainer in a flash, his swift, powerful kick aimed right at her torso, exactly the same devastating blow that had sent Mountain Shaper crashing into a pillar. But Cloud Retainer was ready. With a deft, fluid motion, she leapt high into the air, evading his strike gracefully. From her elevated position, she calculated her counterattack, her mind racing with strategies honed from centuries of adeptal knowledge. Without hesitation, she unleashed a series of powerful anemo bursts, each one slicing through the air and headed directly toward Feldway. He sidestepped and weaved between them effortlessly, his movements calculated and precise. What he didn't realize, however, was that Cloud Retainer had camouflaged herself within the final blast, her form temporarily merging with the very essence of the anemo energy she wielded. As he dodged what he believed to be the last attack, she materialized suddenly from the swirling energy, emerging from behind the fading gusts as if out of thin air, her true form reappearing in a fierce display. Feldway's eyes widened, caught off guard as Cloud Retainer lunged toward him with her hand extended, her sharp nails glinting with concentrated anemo energy. She aimed straight for his chest, her open hand strike infused with all the precision and power of an adeptal warrior. In that moment, her entire form emanated the majestic yet deadly grace of her craned form, her energy focused on piercing through Feldway's defenses and striking with the full force of her ancient strength. Cloud Retainer observed the thin line of crimson on Feldway's side, satisfaction flickering briefly in her gaze. She had finally struck him, albeit not fatally. Feldway, however, was not amused. His usually composed expression darkened as he straightened, regarding her now with a newfound seriousness and a hint of surprise. I underestimated you, he said, voice cool and lethal. I didn't expect you, of all the adepti, to nearly land a killing blow. But the fleeting triumph was short-lived. With a quick shift of his stance, Feldway launched himself at her, his fist hurtling toward her with terrifying speed and strength. Cloud Retainer's instincts took over as she tapped into her adeptal powers, transforming into a swirling form of anemo energy just as his punch passed through, dispersing harmlessly within the gust she had become. She floated back, rematerializing in her human form further down the battlefield, breathing deeply to steady herself. For a brief moment, she assessed him from a distance. Feldway's raw power was undeniable, she could sense the immense energy radiating off him. And yet, she had seen something, a faint flicker in his movements, an indication that even he was not invincible. Each attack had its tell, a gap she could exploit if only she could move swiftly enough. Across from her, Feldway raised a hand to the wound at his side, wiping away the blood with an unreadable expression. Instead of reacting with anger, a chilling smile crept across his face as he prepared himself again. He now recognized Cloud Retainer's strength, and it was clear he no longer intended to hold back. Now at the side place where Mountain Shaper fell, a slow rumbling emerged from the debris. Mountain Shaper pulled himself free, his figure battered, marked with scratches and small wounds from Feldway's assault earlier. His expression was resolute as he steadied himself, taking in the sight of Feldway and Cloud Retainer facing off. He moved forward, sword materializing in his hand once more, determined to stand by his ally's side. Feldway's lips curved in an amused smirk. "So, you're still standing. I thought you'd been dealt with for good," he taunted, eyes gleaming with a sinister satisfaction. Mountain Shaper took his place next to Cloud Retainer, giving her a brief nod. "Apologies for the delay," he murmured, his voice calm but laced with an unbreakable resolve. Cloud Retainer offered him a wry smile, her stance relaxed but her eyes sharp. "Perhaps you old fossils need more training to keep up," she quipped, her tone light but with a sense of shared determination. Mountain Shaper nodded, a small smile crossing his lips. "Perhaps you're right." Together, they braced themselves, shoulder to shoulder, both ready to unleash their full power in the next clash against Feldway. The scene then shifted to the intense struggle between Ether and Chilled. Their battle had worn deep trenches into the ground, each strike pushing both fighters to their limits. Chilled's energy was nearly spent, his once fierce attacks losing momentum, while Ether continued his onslaught, seemingly tireless. Chilled's eyes narrowed as he thought, how is he not tired yet? Is it because he's an outlander? Realizing his own reserves were dwindling, Chilled knew he had one chance left to end this battle. Determination glinted in his eyes as he gathered the last of his strength, leaping high into the sky with a powerful surge. Summoning a polearm infused with abyssal energy, he poured his remaining strength into the weapon, dark energy pulsing and crackling as he prepared his final, desperate strike. He launched the spear with all his might, a fierce battle cry echoing across the battlefield. Ether watched, unfazed, as the weapon hurtled toward him, dark energy ripping through the air. With a steady breath, he summoned a surge of anemo power, creating a burst of wind in an attempt to counter the incoming spear. But the spear, charged with Chilled's abyssal energy, pushed through, hurtling ever closer. Chilled, now sprawled on the ground, gasped for breath, a weary but triumphant grin on his face. "You can't stop it," he yelled, certain he had finally broken through Ether's defenses. But what happened next took Chilled by surprise. Ether, unfazed, extended his hand toward the oncoming spear, beginning to absorb the abyssal energy from it, his calm focus unwavering. The dark energy rapidly drained away, siphoning into Ether's hand, until the spear's power was rendered useless, leaving it to clatter to the ground with a hollow thud. Chilled stared in disbelief, his triumphant smile fading, replaced by a look of astonishment. After a moment of stunned silence, he threw his head back, laughing breathlessly, almost mad with amusement at the unexpected outcome. Floating beside Ether, Paimon watched the scene, her eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. Did he lose it or something?" she whispered to Ether, glancing at Chilled with concern. Ether shook his head slightly, his gaze still on Chilled. "I don't know, and honestly, I don't care to find out. Let's move." Paimon gave a quick nod, and together they made their way across the battlefield, heading toward the ongoing clash between Ganyu and Senora, who were locked in their own fierce confrontation. The battle was far from over, and with each step, Ether steeled himself for what lay ahead. The battle between Ganyu and Senora had reached a fever pitch. Senora, fully transformed into her crimson flame state, was a blazing figure of wrath, her body cloaked in swirling pyro energy. Each strike of her flame-infused whip cracked through the air, leaving searing trails of heat in its wake. Ganyu expertly dodged another fiery blow, gracefully evading the whip as she aimed another charged cryo arrow at Senora. "You sacrificed your physical form," she said, her voice steady as she acknowledged Senyora's transformation. Senyora, however, had no intention of stopping her relentless assault. Without responding to Ganyu's observation, she cracked her whip again, forcing Ganyu to leap back, narrowly avoiding the strike. Ganyu's icy resolve held firm as she unleashed a rapid volley of cryo arrows, her expression focused and unwavering. Though Senyora deflected the arrows with ease, the faint shimmer of frost left by each arrow lingered in the air, challenging the scorching heat of Senyora's flames. Despite her immense power, Senyora began to feel the pressure mounting. All around her, the Fatui soldiers were falling, their numbers dwindling as the Millilith soldiers advanced with relentless determination. Though Millilith arrows did little to pierce her flaming form, their constant barrage distracted her just enough to break her focus on Ganyu. Gritting her teeth, Senyora glanced over at Chilled, who was sprawled on the ground, his abyssal energy depleted and his strength waning. His once defiant spirit seemed to have finally given way to exhaustion. Looking around, Senyora could see that the tides had turned. The Millilith, bolstered by Ketching's command and support, had nearly cleared the battlefield of Fatui reinforcements. Millilith soldiers now focused their attention on Senyora, peppering her with arrows from all sides, forcing her to keep moving to avoid being overwhelmed. In the distance, she could see the Adepti battling fiercely, locked in combat with Feldway himself. "Feldway," she called out, her voice taut with urgency as she blocked another arrow with her whip. "Their numbers are overwhelming us. We need to retreat." Feldway, locked in his own intense battle, turned his attention to assess the battlefield. His expression was impassive, but his sharp gaze quickly took in the situation, the Millilith closing in, the Adepti regrouping with renewed strength, and the Fatui's forces steadily diminishing. With a measured nod, Feldway met Senyora's gaze, his mind already racing as he began to strategize. He knew they were at a disadvantage. Staying longer would only risk more casualties and weaken their forces further. Feldway understood that it was time for a tactical retreat. Survival was the priority now, as a victory here would require a different approach and preparation. Feldway unleashed an immense wave of energy, forcing Cloud Retainer and Mountain Shaper to retreat and regroup momentarily. Wasting no time, he moved in a near-invisible blur toward Dottore, who was locked in intense combat with Xiao and Moon Carver. Arriving beside Dottore with ruthless speed, Feldway delivered a crushing punch to Moon Carver, who barely managed to block it but was sent hurtling back toward the shoreline, his feet skidding across the ground as he tried to steady himself. "We need to go," Feldway commanded with urgency. "Our task here is complete, we have what we came for." Dottore hesitated for a brief moment, his gaze lingering on Xiao, who was still intent on breaking through to him. With a cruel smirk, Dottore sneered, "I would love to continue dissecting your abilities and testing your limits, but, alas, it seems our time here is up." With a wave of his hand, he directed his clone, who had previously been engaging Moon Carver, to engage Xiao, blocking his path and ensuring Dottore's escape. Xiao, furious, fought with renewed ferocity, but the clone held him back, allowing Dottore and Feldway to make their way toward Senyora. Just as they were about to rendezvous with her, Ether and Paimon intercepted them. Ether's eyes burned with determination as he lunged at Feldway, his blade aimed straight for his opponent. With cold calculation, Feldway blocked Ether's strike effortlessly, barely acknowledging the attack. "So, you actually managed to defeat Chilled?" Feldway asked, his tone dripping with mockery as he assessed Ether's stance. He scoffed, unimpressed. "You're still far too weak." In a flash, Feldway closed the distance between them, moving with an eerie speed that left Ether no time to react. Feldway's knee connected brutally with Ether's midsection, sending him flying back toward the shoreline with staggering force. Ether crashed down near Moon Carver, who quickly moved to catch and steady him before setting him on his feet again. Undeterred, Moon Carver shot a determined look toward Feldway and Dottore, standing ready to intercept them again. As the Harbingers gathered near Senyora, their eyes filled with a sharp resolve to end the fight swiftly, Dottore broke from the group and charged toward Ganyu, his hand crackling with destructive energy. Ganyu braced herself, instinctively reaching for her bow, but before Dottore could strike, Cloud Retainer intervened, intercepting him mid-attack. She moved gracefully, her body a blur as she positioned herself between Ganyu and the Harbinger. Her presence bought Ganyu a crucial moment to regroup as Mountain Shaper arrived behind her, his gaze locked firmly on the enemy. However, time was not on the Adepti's side. Feldway, sensing the urgency, extended his arms, summoning a multitude of elemental spears. Each spear, pulsating with a malevolent energy, materialized around him, floating ominously before hurtling toward Ganyu, Cloud Retainer, and Mountain Shaper with deadly precision. The Adepti dodged swiftly, but to their astonishment, the spears shifted mid-air, as if guided by some unseen force. The weapons seemed almost alive, curving back in relentless pursuit, targeting them with an eerie determination. As Ganyu, Cloud Retainer, and Mountain Shaper dodged and deflected the incoming barrage, the Harbingers used the opportunity to regroup. With swift precision, Signora snapped her fiery whip, lashing it around Child's waist, pulling his unconscious body close to her. With a single fluid motion, she handed him to Feldway, who slung Child over his shoulder, his eyes already scanning for an escape route. They turned their focus toward the portal, now swirling open beside them, a gateway to safety amidst the chaos. But their path to retreat was quickly obstructed. Moon Carver, fueled by an unbreakable will, managed to close the distance, landing just in front of the Harbingers. He glared fiercely, unyielding in his stance, blocking their way forward. Signora let out a hiss of frustration, her patience worn thin. These Adepti truly don't know when to back down, do they? She snarled, lashing out with her whip, the flames crackling as they shot toward Moon Carver. But as the whip was about to strike him, Ether intervened, his sword intercepting the flaming lash. Though weakened from Feldway's brutal attack, his face streaked with blood from the earlier blow, Ether's eyes held a fierce determination. "You're not going anywhere," he declared, his voice unwavering. "Give Rimuru back." His gaze shifted to Dottore, who grinned, a glint of malice in his eyes as he raised his hand, displaying the artifact that held Rimuru trapped within. Dottore's smirk widened as he observed Ether's defiance, but suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The sky darkened, and the clouds above swirled ominously, turning an unsettling shade of brown. A slow rumble echoed across the battlefield, and the wind began to whip up clouds of dust, forming what looked like a massive sandstorm. The sudden change stunned both sides, all eyes turned upward to witness the swirling chaos in the sky. There was only one word that escaped the lips of the Adepti, barely a whisper but filled with awe and reverence: Rex Lapis. In that instant, a golden spear, infused with an overwhelming amount of geo-energy, came towards Dottore with blinding speed. It cut through the air like a bolt of lightning, aimed directly at Dottore. The speed was such that only Feldway, with his sharp senses, could see it coming. Yet even with his quick reaction, Feldway realized he was too late to intercept it. His eyes widened, a flicker of panic flashing across his usually composed face. The spear hurtled toward the artifact, the very object holding Rimuru captive. As it neared, Feldway could do nothing but watch, his mind racing with the implications. If that spear shattered the artifact, Rimuru would be freed, a possibility he had not accounted for. He barely had a chance to shout a warning before the spear's sharp, glowing point connected with the artifact. The impact was immediate. A shattering sound echoed as the artifact cracked, a web of fractures splintering across its surface. A glass-like structure of magical energy burst outward, fragmenting into glistening shards. The spear pierced through Dottore's hand in the process, causing him to recoil in pain, his grip on the artifact loosening. With a final flash of brilliant light, the artifact exploded, signaling Rimuru's release. From the fractured remnants, a figure emerged. It was Rimuru, surrounded by a faint, ethereal glow. His presence alone seemed to shift the energy of the battlefield, and as his form fully materialized, he let out a controlled breath, exuding a calm yet intense aura. Without wasting a moment, Rimuru summoned 4 clones, each taking on a protective stance around him. One clone immediately flew toward the city, while the remaining 3 assumed a meditative position, channeling energy directly into Rimuru, enhancing his strength and focus. Rimuru's gaze was sharp as he assessed the situation. His hand moved fluidly to his side, unsheathing his katana with a practiced elegance. The blade gleamed in the dim light, a symbol of his determination. His stance shifted, his body aligning with the precision of a seasoned swordsman. Energy crackled around him, and with a calm but focused expression, he prepared himself for the coming confrontation. Feldway, Signora, and Dottore now stood motionless, each one assessing this new development. The battle had taken an unforeseen turn, and as Rimuru faced his captors, the tension in the air was palpable. The intervention of Rex Lapis, the intervention of the Adepti, and Rimuru's freedom had changed everything. With his katana in hand, Rimuru's gaze bore into the Harbingers, signaling that he was ready for whatever would come next. The battlefield had become a stage for a climactic showdown, with both sides knowing that this encounter would not end as it had begun. As the tide of the battle shifted, the Harbingers, Feldway, Signora, and Dottore, found themselves cornered. Rimuru's release had changed the landscape of the conflict, his presence resonating with a newfound strength that left even Feldway and the other Harbingers on edge. Signora's gaze flickered between the advancing Adepti and Rimuru, her expression betraying a rare hint of vulnerability. "We need to retreat," she said, her voice low yet resolute. "We're at a disadvantage here." Feldway nodded, his face grim as he assessed the battlefield. "You're right," he replied with a reluctant edge to his tone. "We don't have the resources to win this. Let's go back." Nearby, Dottore was recovering from the impact of Rex Lapis's golden spear, which had struck his hand. Gritting his teeth, he wrenched the spear free from his injured hand, holding it up with a glint of dark satisfaction. "I'll take this, at least," he muttered, his eyes lingering on the weapon. Despite the wound, a twisted grin spread across his face as he took the spear, seeing it as a prize from the battle. The Harbingers turned and moved quickly toward the swirling portal, which had opened just behind them. Rimuru, Ether, the Adepti, and the Millilith soldiers all advanced, trying to intercept the retreating enemies. Cloud Retainer unleashed a powerful Anemo burst, hoping to disrupt their escape, while Mountain Shaper raised walls of Geo to block their path. Even Ganyu, injured but determined, notched an arrow infused with cryo-energy, aiming for the heart of the portal. But the Harbingers were swift, their retreat carefully orchestrated. With one last glance over his shoulder, Feldway stepped through the portal, followed closely by Signora and Dottore. The portal shimmered and closed in on itself, sealing with a faint hum and leaving the battlefield silent once more. As the dust settled, Rimuru sheathed his katana, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the spot where the portal had vanished. The battle was over, but the threat of the Harbingers remained. This encounter had shown them both the power and danger that lingered within Teyvat, and Rimuru knew the Harbingers would return, stronger and more prepared. But for now, they had won this battle, and he would use the time to gather allies, rebuild, and prepare for what was to come. As the dust settled, the defenders of Liu let out a collective breath, their hearts gradually slowing after the intense battle. The Fatui had finally retreated, and with them, the ominous presence that had loomed over the battlefield dissipated. Rimuru, now freed from his confinement, looked around, assessing the state of his allies and the battlefield. Ether, visibly exhausted but wearing a relieved smile, approached Rimuru. "It's good to see you're all right," he said, his voice a mixture of weariness and genuine concern. The corners of his mouth tightened slightly, showing the strain of the fight. Rimuru returned the smile, nodding in gratitude. "I can't thank you enough, Ether. You and everyone here, you've done more for me than I can ever repay." His gaze softened as he noticed a faint trail of blood on the corner of Ether's mouth. "Looks like we should get you checked out too," Rimuru added with a hint of concern. Ether gave a slight chuckle, brushing it off. "I'll be fine," he replied, though the fatigue was apparent in his voice. As they exchanged these words, the Adepti, Mountain Shaper, Cloud Retainer, and Moon Carver, gathered around Rimuru. Each wore a look of respect but also curiosity, their expressions showing the weight of the questions they held back in the midst of the battle. Finally, Mountain Shaper spoke up, his tone carrying the measured cadence of a wise, ancient being. "Do you have any idea why they were so determined to capture you, or who that Feldway truly is? His strength is beyond anything we have seen." Rimuru's expression grew serious as he considered how much to share. "Feldway, he's a being from my world. His strength, his motives, these are matters connected to things far beyond just this world," he said carefully. "But it's a complex situation. Too much to explain here and now." Rimuru's gaze shifted to the crowd that had started to gather, drawn to the aftermath of the battle. "It might be best to discuss this privately. There are too many ears around." The Adepti exchanged glances, each understanding the importance of discretion. They had faced threats before, but the mysterious, relentless power of Feldway made it clear that this was no ordinary conflict. Paimon, floating nearby with a mix of excitement and curiosity, couldn't resist asking, "And that golden spear? Where did it even come from?" Her eyes sparkled as she recalled the miraculous moment it appeared, turning the tide of the battle. As Xiao teleported near the group, his gaze turned reflective, his voice soft but certain as he answered, I think it came from Yaoguang Shoal. The aura, it unmistakably belongs to Rex Lapis. I went there just now, but... He paused, his brow furrowing in contemplation. I didn't see anyone. A silence fell over the group as they processed this revelation. The spear, with its unmistakable power and precision, had shattered the artifact imprisoning Rimuru, a feat that took immense strength and exact timing. Moon Carver spoke up thoughtfully, his voice carrying a weight of reverence. If Rex Lapis truly intervened to help us, why would he choose to remain hidden? Why not join us in person? Rimuru nodded, his mind racing as he, too, tried to piece together the mystery. Perhaps he has his reasons, Rimuru said softly, glancing back in the direction of Yaoguang Shoal. It may not be our place to question his motives. What matters is that his timing saved us all. Cloud Retainer tilted her head thoughtfully, her voice calm but resolute. Yes, Rex Lapis has always been wise. His actions are rarely without purpose, even if that purpose is hidden from us. Satisfied for the moment, the group began making their way back. The Jade Chamber, their temporary stronghold above Liu, had drifted gently downward during the battle, but now it began to rise again, returning to its perch high above the harbor. Together, they watched as it ascended, a symbol of resilience and strength against the forces that had threatened their world. Inside the Grand Chamber, the atmosphere was thick with tension, a silence settling over everyone present. The Jade Chamber, normally a symbol of strength and diplomacy, now served as a fortress for a discussion of the utmost gravity. The doors were securely locked, the windows sealed to ensure that no sound escaped. As they all sat around the table, Moon Carver was the first to break the silence. His voice was low, laced with concern. This Feldway, he's undoubtedly an outlander. But what is your relationship with him? The question lingered in the air, and everyone's gaze shifted to Rimuru, whose expression was contemplative and slightly pained. Rimuru sat quietly, his eyes closed, as if gathering his thoughts. Ningguang's voice was firm but understanding as she added, You've already seen what they're capable of, what nearly happened today. You know as well as I do that this could happen again, perhaps even on a greater scale. Please, don't keep anything from us now. Rimuru opened his eyes, exhaling slowly. Very well, he began, his tone solemn. I suppose the best place to start would be with a name you likely have never heard of, Veldanava. The adeptee exchanged curious, uncertain glances, and even the unflappable Ningguang raised an eyebrow in intrigue. The name was foreign, strange even to these ancient beings. Moon Carver looked to Cloud Retainer, who only shook her head, just as confused. Finally, Cloud Retainer spoke. No, we have not heard of this Veldanava. Rimuru nodded, expecting as much. Then I'll start at the beginning, he said, his gaze distant as he recalled the long history. Veldanava, he is no ordinary being. He's a god, an entity so powerful that even calling him a god might not do him justice. Everyone around him seemed taken aback. Paimon's mouth dropped open, and she leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. A god? You mean, like an archon? Rimuru shook his head, the gravity of his words deepening. No, not like an archon. Veldanava is an entity far beyond them, even beyond the elemental powers that archons wield. He is truly omnipotent, with powers that touch every corner of existence. His strength will surpass even the highest powers of Teyvat. The revelation settled over them like a cold wind, and a heavy silence filled the room as everyone processed the weight of Rimuru's words. Even the adeptee, who had lived for millennia, struggled to comprehend such a being. Moon Carver's gaze hardened, and he crossed his arms thoughtfully, the implications unsettling. Rimuru continued, seeing the questions in their eyes. Feldway is Veldanava's first creation, his primordial angel, if you will. Cloud Retainer tilted her head, her curiosity evident as she asked, primordial. What do you mean by this? Rimuru nodded, understanding the need for clarity. Primordial beings are entities that have existed since the dawn of time itself. They are ageless, born from the original powers that shaped the universe. Feldway is one of these beings. He was there at the very beginning. Xiao's expression darkened, and he spoke up, his voice a low murmur. So you're saying they're as old as time itself? Beyond the archons? Rimuru nodded solemnly. Yes, exactly. Feldway and beings like him possess powers that defy normal understanding. Their mere presence can alter the course of worlds. Ganyu's brows furrowed, struggling to comprehend the enormity of it. But why would Veldanava create a being like that? Aren't angels supposed to protect? Feldway seems to be doing the opposite. Paimon quickly nodded in agreement. Yeah, angels are supposed to be on the side of good, right? Rimuru's face darkened, a hint of sadness in his gaze. It's true that many angelic beings are meant to protect and serve others. But Feldway's story is more complicated. He took a deep breath before explaining further. Long ago, Veldanava created many beings, each with a specific purpose. Feldway, as his first creation, was made to be a guardian, a protector of balance, meant to uphold divine order across existence. Ningguang's gaze was piercing as she leaned forward. And what happened? What changed? As the tense atmosphere filled the jade chamber, Rimuru took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to share. Looking around at everyone's expectant faces, he spoke with solemnity, "I owe all of you a full explanation." He glanced at each of them, sensing their readiness to hear the truth. The main reason Feldway is doing this, the reason he's trying to bring such devastation, is to force Veldanava to return. He believes that by threatening to destroy the entire creation Veldanava cherished, he can compel him to reappear. Moon Carver furrowed his brow in concern, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the implications. Veldanava. Where is he now? And why is Feldway so determined to make him return? Rimuru paused, letting the significance of his words settle on everyone. Veldanava died, he said slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper. Shock spread through the room as gasps echoed softly. Paimon blinked, wide-eyed. But, isn't he an almighty god? She stammered, struggling to reconcile the idea of such a powerful being meeting his end. Rimuru nodded, his expression grave. Yes, he was. But when he died, he was no more than a human. Confusion flickered in the eyes of everyone around him as they tried to understand. Rimuru explained, Veldanava created the multiverse, pouring much of his power into this act of creation. Later, he used even more of it to create 7 special abilities known as the virtue skills. Mountain Shaper leaned forward, curiosity mixed with apprehension in his gaze. What are these virtue skills? Rimuru took a deep breath. They're something like what we call ultimate skills. In a way, you can think of them as similar to your visions here. But they don't just harness elemental energy, they're far more powerful, far more transformative. These skills don't just channel power, they allow users to manipulate the very laws of reality, to bend or even disregard them completely. He paused, letting his words sink in, watching as the weight of this revelation settled over everyone. Ningguang, who always kept a clear head, spoke up with a focused expression. So Veldanava must have been incredibly powerful to create these skills. Rimuru nodded. Yes, but it came at a cost. Each virtue skill drained a portion of his strength. Even after creating them, he was still formidable, but then he met someone. A high human named Lucia. He fell in love with her, and they had a daughter together, Milam Nava. But when Milam was born, she inherited the last of Veldanava's power, leaving him as a mere human. Though he was once a god, he had become vulnerable, mortal. Everyone listened intently, realizing they were learning the reason why such a being could meet his end. Rimuru continued, Veldanava lived a peaceful life in the Eastern Empire, ruled by Lucia's brother, Rudra. But one day, while Rudra was away, a rival nation attacked. The empire emerged victorious, but Veldanava and Lucia both perished in the conflict. Xiao, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke, his voice contemplative. So that's how he died. But why can't Feldway let him go? Why is he still so obsessed? Rimuru paused, gathering his thoughts. Because Veldanava has the potential to return. The room grew tense. At this revelation, everyone exchanged surprised glances, the implications beginning to sink in. Xiao pressed further, what do you mean? He was a human when he died. Rimuru nodded. Yes, he was. But his essence remained that of a true dragon. And one of the unique powers of true dragons is the ability to reincarnate, even after death. But Veldanava never returned. A heavy silence settled over the room as everyone digested this. Ningguang's gaze sharpened, her mind clearly racing with implications, strategizing around this revelation. Rimuru continued. Feldway, watching and waiting for his god's return, began to lose hope. As time passed, he began to believe that Veldanava had abandoned them all, leaving the primordial angels without guidance or purpose. His sorrow turned into bitterness, then into resolve. Feldway's logic twisted, leading him to believe that if Veldanava truly cared about his creation, he'd appear to stop its destruction. So, Feldway set out to threaten existence itself, hoping that by endangering the very creation Veldanava once loved, he could draw him out. The room was silent, the weight of Rimuru's explanation settling heavily over everyone. The Adepti and Ningguang were visibly shaken, their expressions tense as they realized the scale of Feldway's intent. So that's why Feldway's willing to destroy everything, Ningguang murmured, realization dawning in her eyes. He believes that by doing so, he can make his god return. Moon Carver, ever wise, spoke with a solemn tone. Then Feldway isn't just an enemy, he's a lost soul, clinging to hope in the most destructive way possible. Rimuru nodded. Yes. But Feldway's conviction makes him incredibly dangerous. He's not lashing out blindly, he's acting with purpose. As Rimuru's explanation unfolded, the gravity of the situation continued to weigh on everyone in the Jade Chamber. The once calm atmosphere had become intensely serious. Cloud Retainer, her tone low and cautious, commented, ultimate skills, they sound exceedingly dangerous. Rimuru nodded, his expression mirroring the unease in the room. Yes, they are. The power they hold is far beyond anything you've seen here. Ganyu, listening with an intensity rare even for her, asked, so, are there only 7 of these ultimate skills? Rimuru considered her question for a moment. Well, let's just say, there can be more. In fact, a unique skill can sometimes evolve into an ultimate skill. This new revelation stirred the room. Ketching's eyes narrowed, her tone probing. What do you mean by that? And what exactly are these unique skills? Rimuru explained, there's a hierarchy to these abilities. At the lowest level, there are extra skills, which are fairly common and easy to obtain. Above those are unique skills, which are rare and significantly more powerful. And finally, there are ultimate skills, the pinnacle of all abilities, the rarest and most formidable powers one can possess. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. As for the evolution part, yes, a unique skill can evolve into an ultimate skill. But to do so, the user must possess a strong soul, unwavering willpower, and meet a number of complex requirements. Only then can the skill evolve to its ultimate form. Moon Carver, taking in this knowledge, voiced a thought that had likely crossed many minds. So, what you're saying is, there could be countless ultimate skills. Rimuru nodded. Yes, but virtue skills are a bit different. Although they're classified as ultimate skills, they were crafted by Veldanava himself. Because of this, they're a little special. And much more powerful. Ningguang's eyes narrowed, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. So, I assume you possess one yourself? She asked, her voice steady yet probing. Rimuru chuckled, slightly impressed at her perceptiveness. And what made you think so? Ningguang's gaze was unwavering as she replied, to face an opponent like Feldway, you would need power equal to his. And when I saw Feldway looking at you, even as he left with the Harbingers, I could see that he regarded you as a genuine threat, a force to be reckoned with. Sighing, Rimuru nodded. As sharp as ever, Ningguang. Yes, I do have an ultimate skill. The Adepti turned their attention to Rimuru, a new intensity in their expressions. If you and Feldway both possess such powers, why haven't you used them? Cloud Retainer asked, her gaze filled with concern. Rimuru's expression grew somber. I would have used it, but, my powers are sealed. At this admission, a wave of shock and apprehension swept through the room. Whispers broke out as the Adepti and Ningguang exchanged worried glances. Moon Carver was the first to speak, his voice tinged with urgency. Your powers are sealed. What if Feldway attacks again? Rimuru held up his hand, calming them. Relax. Yes, my powers are sealed, but so are Feldway's. For now, neither of us has access to our full strength. A relieved sigh escaped from several of them, though the tension in the room remained. Moon Carver, still processing all the revelations Rimuru had shared, fixed his gaze on him, his eyes sharp and intent. Could you show us these seals? Rimuru nodded, turning slightly and manifesting an image of the intricate seal on his back, giving the Adepti, Ningguang, Ganyu, and Ketching a chance to examine it closely. The sight of the seal left them in quiet awe, yet it carried an unmistakable air of dread. The circular pattern was intricate and complex, with every line and symbol pulsing faintly with an inner power. The upper half of the seal glowed brightly, emanating a warm golden light that seemed to represent divine energy and structured order. The lower half, however, was surrounded by a dark, malevolent purple aura that seemed almost alive, radiating an intense and chaotic energy that made those who looked upon it instinctively pull back. Moon Carver glanced at the other adeptee, exchanging looks of shock and confusion. Cloud Retainer broke the silence first, her usually calm tone tinged with astonishment. In all my centuries, I have never encountered a seal like this. The other adeptee nodded in agreement, each of their expressions showing a mix of curiosity and concern. As they returned to their seats, Moon Carver looked thoughtful, clearly still pondering what he'd seen. I can discern a faint trace of the energy from the upper half, a controlled, orderly aura. I suspect this might be the influence of Feldway. Yet, the rest of it feels as if it is hidden behind a thick fog. Mountain Shaper's gaze lingered on the dark, lower half of the seal, his expression shifting to one of unease. As for the lower part, even to glance at it brings discomfort. Its aura feels as though it would corrupt the mind of anyone who gets too close to it. The adeptee collectively nodded, visibly disturbed by the dark energy radiating from the lower part of the seal. After a pause, Moon Carver turned his attention back to Rimuru, his eyes steady and questioning. If the upper part of this seal is Feldway's doing, then what about the lower half? Whose power is that? Rimuru let out a soft chuckle, realizing he had yet to explain the full nature of the seal. Ah, I guess I didn't mention this part, did I? The lower part of the seal, that's from Ivaraj. The adeptee exchanged looks of astonishment and apprehension. The name seemed foreign to them, and a silence settled over the room as they waited for Rimuru to elaborate. Seeing their confusion, Rimuru began explaining the little he knew about Ivaraj, a being shrouded in mystery, whose very essence was rooted in chaos. He described Ivaraj's infamous reputation as the destroyer of worlds, an entity whose mere existence seemed to embody a primal force of destruction. As Rimuru's words sank in, the concern among the adeptee deepened, each of them now fully understanding the weight of the situation. But when Rimuru mentioned that Ivaraj was also somewhere in their world, the adeptee's expressions turned sharp, their eyes narrowing as they fixed him with pointed stares. Cloud Retainer's voice held an edge as she questioned him. And this is information you decided to withhold from us until now. Rimuru raised his hands defensively, a faint smile on his face as he tried to ease their tension. Well, I'm telling you now, aren't I? Xiao, who had been standing quietly, arms folded as he listened, finally spoke, his tone carrying a sense of urgency. Where is he now? Rimuru shrugged, his expression calm despite the gravity of the situation. I don't know exactly. But I don't think he's going to cause any problems for us, at least, not for a while. Xiao's expression darkened as he folded his arms, looking directly at Rimuru with a challenging gaze. So, you're certain Ivaraj won't strike now? Rimuru nodded calmly, meeting Xiao's skepticism with steady eyes. When I fought both Feldway and Ivaraj, it was a battle that pushed us to our limits. In the end, each of us used our remaining strength to seal the other's powers, forcing us into this world. If Ivaraj had regained his full strength, we would already feel the impact of his rampage. His silence likely means he's either in a deep slumber or waiting to recover his power. The weight of Rimuru's explanation settled across the room. Moon Carver's expression grew tense as he pressed his hands together. Then, we must locate Ivaraj before he becomes a threat beyond our control. Everyone nodded in agreement, though a note of worry played across Paimon's face as she floated next to Ether. But we don't even know where he is. She blurted out. Rimuru looked at her and nodded, acknowledging her concern. That's true, Paimon. But with Feldway's alliance with the Fatui, we can assume he may be aware of Ivaraj's presence too. They might be looking to manipulate Ivaraj for their own goals, which makes them even more dangerous. Cloud Retainer's gaze sharpened as she surveyed the room, her tone weighted with gravity. If that is indeed the case, we cannot afford to delay. Any advantage they might gain from Ivaraj would be disastrous for all of Teyvat. The atmosphere grew tense, as each person absorbed the gravity of Rimuru's words. But amid the heaviness, Ether's curiosity surfaced as he turned to Rimuru with an inquisitive look. What exactly are these true dragons you mentioned before? A hint of a smile softened Rimuru's expression as he addressed Ether's question. True dragons are, in a sense, Veldonava's kin. They exist at the highest level of power, unmatched by almost any other being in existence. You could say they are the guardians of balance within creation, yet they act freely without direct loyalty to anyone but themselves. Ningguang's eyes gleamed as she leaned forward, curiosity mingling with her ever-keen analysis. And how many of these true dragons are there? Rimuru took a deep breath, as if considering his words carefully. There are 5. First, Veldonava himself, who is the oldest and the original. Then there's Velzard, Velgrind, and Veldora. His words trailed off, and a momentary hesitation flickered in his gaze. Ningguang's sharp eyes caught it immediately, her voice turning cool and calculating. It seems as though there's something you're not telling us, Rimuru. Caught. Rimuru gave a small, sheepish chuckle, scratching his head. He took a breath, steeling himself before finally revealing, the 5th true dragon, is me. A profound silence fell over the room. The Adepti and others stared at Rimuru, their expressions frozen in stunned disbelief as they tried to process what he had just revealed. For a moment, no one could find the words to respond. Cloud Retainer broke the silence first, her usually calm voice tinged with awe. You are one of these true dragons. But how? Rimuru's face softened as he explained, in my previous world, I wasn't a true dragon. But after my evolution, my powers grew and evolved, and I eventually attained the status of a true dragon. It was a transformation that even I hadn't anticipated, but it has allowed me to stand on equal footing with beings like true dragons. Ningguang's expression turned contemplative, her sharp mind racing to absorb this new information. So, in essence, you possess the same nature as Veldonava himself. Yes, Rimuru replied, his gaze growing distant as he recalled his journey. It's a unique form of power, rooted in creation itself. My existence as a true dragon means that, like Veldonava, I have an eternal essence. That's why even if I'm defeated, I can return. Xiao leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he took in this revelation. And does that mean you have the same capacity to wield this overwhelming force as Veldonava once did? Rimuru nodded slowly. To a certain extent, yes. My abilities might not be identical and as powerful as him, but I can wield the powers of a true dragon, which includes immense strength, control over nature, and the power to alter reality itself. Cloud Retainer's eyes gleamed with newfound respect, but there was also a glint of worry. If such power lies within you, it makes you an indispensable ally but also a potential threat if such strength were ever turned against us. Rimuru smiled gently, appreciating the honesty. That's true. However, my intentions are to protect, not harm. I have no desire to destroy the worlds I've come to care about. Paimon floated closer, staring at Rimuru with wide eyes. So, you're not just a king, but a godlike being too. Rimuru gave a modest nod, a small smile on his face. But Keqing's eyes widened in surprise, and she immediately turned to Rimuru with a questioning look. Wait, you're a king? Rimuru looked at her, pausing before he nodded. Yes, that's right. In my world, I am the king of the Tempest Federation. The room went quiet, with everyone processing the unexpected revelation. Ningguang's expression shifted, the sharpness of her gaze giving way to a calm, measured smile. So we've been sitting here with a king and a being of godlike strength without even realizing it. I hope you can forgive us if there's been anything less than suitable to your liking. And, I trust this won't affect our relationship. Rimuru chuckled, raising a hand in reassurance. There's nothing to forgive, Ningguang. I'm here as your friend, not to sit above you. Please, there's no need to change the way we interact. Just relax. A shared sigh of relief passed through the room, and Paimon broke into a grin, visibly relieved. Phew. That's good to hear. For a moment, I thought we'd have to start bowing every time we saw you. Rimuru laughed warmly, shaking his head. Absolutely not. We're all in this together, and titles don't mean anything between friends. So let's keep things just as they are. As Rimuru's issues were temporarily set aside, Mooncarver's sharp gaze turned toward Xiao. Conqueror of demons, he said gravely, are you absolutely certain there was nothing to be found at Yaoguang Shoal? Xiao nodded, his tone unwavering. I went immediately after those harbingers vanished. When I reached Yaoguang Shoal, I found nothing. No sign of life, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone had been there recently. It was as if the place had been completely untouched. A heavy silence filled the room as everyone processed Xiao's words. This mysterious absence of evidence heightened their suspicion. If whoever or whatever they were dealing with could conceal their presence to such a degree, then the threat may be even greater than they anticipated. Breaking the silence, Ether looked around at the others, his voice measured yet worried. Now that we're certain Rex Lapis is alive, how are we supposed to tell Zhongli? We've gone through all the preparations for the rite of parting. He's been guiding us all this time under the belief that this ceremony would be his farewell to Liu. Ningguang, ever thoughtful, narrowed her eyes as she weighed their options. I think it's best we put a temporary halt on the rite of parting, she suggested, her voice firm. Until we can confirm Rex Lapis's current location and his intentions, it would be unwise to make any formal announcements. For now, this knowledge should remain within the circle of people here. Everyone nodded in agreement, realizing the potential for chaos if word of Rex Lapis's survival were to spread without any clear explanation. Such news could lead to a loss of trust in Liu's leaders, even stirring fear among the citizens. Cloud Retainer spoke up next, her tone somber. Indeed. This knowledge is delicate. Rex Lapis may have his reasons for keeping his existence a secret. Revealing his survival without understanding his intentions could disrupt the stability of Liu, especially during this fragile period. With that, the discussion shifted to a shared understanding of caution. They each felt the burden of guarding the secret, knowing the risks it posed to reveal the truth prematurely. As the meeting concluded, each member took a moment to gather their thoughts. Moon Carver, Cloud Retainer, and Mountain Shaper exchanged knowing glances, each already contemplating their next steps to protect Liu. Ningguang, meanwhile, mentally mapped out a strategy to manage public affairs subtly, should rumors arise. Xiao, silent as ever, vowed to be even more vigilant in his watch over Liu's boundaries, ready to act at the first hint of danger. As they left the hall, they were not just carrying the secrets of gods and dragons, but the weight of their responsibility to uphold peace and order. As Rimuru, Paimon, and Ether left the Jade Chamber, Paimon drifted beside them, her expression filled with concern. So, how exactly are we supposed to tell Zhongli that the rite of parting is going to be put on hold? She asked, her voice uncertain. Rimuru paused thoughtfully. I think it might be wise to explain that the KabirSingh is investigating something related to Rex Lapis and has decided to delay the ceremony. We can say it's a measure to ensure that his memory is honored properly. But, Ether interjected, frowning, won't Zhongli feel like it's disrespectful to delay it? He might think we're casting doubt on Rex Lapis's passing, especially after all the preparations have been made. Rimuru nodded, acknowledging the complexity of the situation. Good point, Ether. We'll have to be careful with our words. But let's not worry too much until we actually find him. The three continued to walk through the vibrant streets of Liu Harbor, passing by merchants calling out to customers and the rich scents of spices and tea blending in the air. Their destination was Wangsheng Funeral Parlor, where Zhongli often spent his time. As they approached, they spotted him standing outside the entrance, gazing thoughtfully into the distance. He seemed lost in his own reflections, but as they drew near, he looked up, his calm gaze meeting theirs. Oh, you're all here, Zhongli greeted them with a faint smile. I was hoping to speak with you in private. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon exchanged puzzled glances but nodded, agreeing to follow him. Zhongli led them outside the city's bustling area, towards the serene spot near the statue of the Seven. Here, the sounds of the city gave way to the peaceful rustling of leaves and the soft flow of distant water, creating an air of tranquility. As they reached the statue, Zhongli turned to face them, his expression serious yet gentle. Before he could speak, Paimon blurted out, Zhongli, actually, we came here to tell you something important. A flicker of amusement passed over Zhongli's face as he looked at her. I know, Paimon. Rimuru, Ether, and Paimon all stared at him, taken aback. Rimuru raised an eyebrow and exchanged a glance with the others. But, we haven't even told you anything yet. Zhongli's faint smile held a trace of mystery, as if he were in on a secret. You came to inform me that the KabirSingh has decided to put the rite of parting on hold, did you not? The group was stunned, and Paimon gaped at him. How did you know? No one else should know about this yet. Zhongli's gaze grew distant as he looked at each of them, his eyes filled with quiet wisdom, and then he looked towards Rimuru and said, "You had suspicions that Rex Lapis may have faked his death, don't you?" Rimuru felt his suspicions align with this, as his own theories about Zhongli's identity seemed to confirm themselves in his mind. "Are you?" he began to ask, his voice just a whisper. But before he could finish, Zhongli continued in a resolute tone. "I know what you're about to say. And yes, I am aware of everything you've suspected." His gaze shifted, resting on the statue of the seven as he spoke. "That is why I want the rite of parting to proceed. It is a farewell, not just to Rex Lapis, but to an era." The weight of his words settled heavily on everyone present, and a quiet realization spread among them. Ether and Paimon's eyes widened as they finally understood the truth. All this time, the one they had traveled with, shared stories with, and turned to for wisdom had been the very god they sought to honor. Rex Lapis, the beloved god of contracts and protector of Liu, had been standing beside them as Zhongli, watching over them in silence.